Hi, welcome to JavaPolis 2006. Thanks for missing your lunch in order to join me in my presentation today, which I think will be about 15-20 minutes long. I call myself a Java EE software designer, but it translates as a software developer with a lot of experience developing software, primarily for investment banks. And I'm going to talk to you about Maven 2, if you've used Maven 2. But it's not an introduction into Maven, but it will be all about corporate development with Maven 2. In other words, Java EE. I'm going to explain the best practice of using Maven 2 with Java EE. So I've worked in investment banking for a few years now. I am the JUG leader of the Java Web Users Group in the UK. My technical area is obviously IT. And why do I love Maven 2? Well, I like Maven because I can remember the days in other projects where I sat with a build.xml file. That's from Apache Ant, if you don't know already. And it was 1,000 lines long. And I always had to program my own Java C, my own Java doc, and my unit tests. And if I wanted code coverage reports, I had to do that by hand. Maven is completely different in that it's declarative instead of imperative. You just say what you would like to do in your build system instead of defining or specifying exactly how to do it, as in the case of Ant. So what is Maven? Maven basically is the project object model file, which is an XML file, which is metadata. But in the longer term, if you're learning Maven 2, just got into it, Maven is the POM, it's the application called Maven, it's the plugins around Maven, and it's also, most importantly, the repositories around Maven. And with that, Maven can download all your dependencies, your artifacts from eBiblio, and actually build your software project for you. Now, if you think of the way you have to do it with Ant, suppose you downloaded struts. I'm talking about struts about 3 years ago now. The first thing you do, if you wanted to compile it, is look at the README file. And then you look at the install file, and then you'll realize, oh no, I can't just compile it with Ant. I need to download common beans, I need to download common collections, and I need to install all those libraries before I can even attempt to compile struts. With Maven, that isn't the case anymore. Maven manages your dependencies. It takes care of your primary dependencies and also your transitive dependencies. These are the dependencies like common beans would depend on. Maven also can generate the Java doc and a basic site for you. It can also run unit tests and also generate reports. You could also do this with Maven 1, but Maven 2 is the latest version. So this is a project object model file, and I'm not going to spend too much time describing everything about it. But the main thing is that you have to give a group ID, which is the grouping for your project. The artifact ID is the name of your project and also a version number. And you'll see there's something called snapshot version, which means something special in Maven. But that's moving swiftly ahead. Oh, let me go back one bit. I missed out dependencies. That's how you specify a dependency. And you notice that it's a JUnit, and you can tell it, provide a scope for your dependency that only, so that it only gets included in a runtime class path. And the same would happen again. You just expand that XML for common beans, for JDBC, etc., etc. Okay, so I'm assuming that you've used Maven before at least just once. The one thing I would say is that if you are using it in a corporate Java EE setting, and you should migrate a project one at a time. In other words, if you start using, say, like IBM's clear case, leave that existing and build XML project in clear case and start another Bob with your Maven nice project. So if you work that way, you won't be breaking your builds. And at least you'll be proving the development to the management as you would do actually. So this is the standard directory structure. Under the source directory, you have either main or a test branch. And under your main, you have your Java folder. And under that folder, you only are supposed to store Java source code files. Excuse me. In parallel to the Java directory, you have resources. And in that path, that directory folder, you store things like XML, .xmls, .properties, .dtds. The whole point of this is to separate the things that your Java code needs, the resources, from instead of bundling it all together in one directory structure. The test folder is a separation of concerns. In your main folder, you have everything that gets assembled into a build. Your test folder is designed for your unit tests. And if you think about it, you don't really want to be deploying unit tests to your customers. It would be nonsense. If you're going to use Maven 2 in Java EE projects, you need to understand Maven's concept of multiple modules. Multiple module projects are just a way of demarking between a web tier or business tier and between your own application tiers. And the trick to understand multiple modules is that POM files, project object files, all descend from something called the super POM, which is the master. It is the default of everything in Maven. And that allows you to have a very reduced XML file, as you saw back there. The other thing you can do inside a POM file is also specify a parent project. In this way, you can have hierarchies of projects. The one thing I would say, I'm talking about multiple modules, is that you should not nest your projects. The reason is you're working in a heterogeneous team who love different IDEs. Eclipse and IBM WebSphere don't handle nested projects very well. So the best idea is to have a parallel structure. And then the other idea I would say is to have a master POM file that builds everything. It's a bit like X Windows from 10 years ago, a decade ago. You just went make world and that would build the whole of X Windows. Okay, if you are new to Maven, your very best friend is Maven install. Because Maven is repository based. A mistake that newbie Maven users do is just Maven compile, Maven test. These are actually Unix or DOS commands, and they don't bother installing because they're not using shared repositories or not working with developers. And you need to do this. Maven has a concept of two different types of repositories. A local repository that sits on the developer's machine in your home directory, and a remote repository, which is shareable. And often, what you would need to do is to install your artifacts, your finished artifacts, into a remote repository. If you're writing Java Enterprise Edition applications, you're probably going to be using EJBs. And what happens, Maven has an EJB plugin, but it's very raw. It just assembles your EJBs, your home and remote directory classes, and that's it. But if you've used a commercial application server like WebSphere or VEA WebLogic, you would know your EJB jars have to be instrumented. The Maven EJB plugin does not instrument. It is open source. And so the way around it is to, controversially, to use AND. And AND can be used from Maven by calling the AND run plugin. And in that way there's a way to instrument your EJBs. So for example, you have your AND run call an AND task that calls the WS-EJB-C, the WebSphere EJB compiler, and that will go off and instrument your jar file for you. And then you'll have a jar file that you can deploy to a web server. And the same account goes for an EAR enterprise archive. So what I would say now is, having done a lot of development with Maven, one of the things I've come across is that you have different requirements in the lifetime of an application. If you have to deploy to different servers, for example, or to deploy to different machines, then you need to configure it somehow in a build configuration. And Maven has the concept of profiles, which is another XML file that sits parallel to the POM file. And there, your profile is activated by a command line, or it could be activated by files that don't exist or do exist on that particular machine. It could be activated by an operating system existence or not. The whole point is that you can configure these sort of cross-platform dependencies in a different way. And you will have to do this. Obviously, you are doing this for your development build, your user access testing build, and obviously for production. And using profiles is a way to build on web server farms, and also if you want to use continuation integrations, like something like Continuum or Cruise Control. I would consider that you ask your management to set up a corporate internal repository very early on, particularly in a large organization. And there are two open source tools that you can use. One is called Archiva, which is Jason Van Ziel's application from Mageia. The other, a competing one, is Proximity. They're both functionally usable, but they haven't been exactly released yet. It's still betaware, and one is a release candidate. You can, however, convert a local repository into a remote repository. And you need specialist tools that don't exist. And having said that, once you've converted, you can even host it on a Tomcat or a Jetty and just serve the files. Once you've developed your Mavenized application, which has 10 different projects or more, your manager might come up to you and say, I need to build this project on a dedicated machine, or I'm going to outsource it to India, and they need to build it, and then it will be installed on our www.xyzserver.com. Now the trouble is, if you have to go through corporate management and rules that block access to the internet, Maven is kind of very tricky now to solve debugging issues. So if there's a bug, I recommend that you, in your corporate repository, that you change one thing at a time, and so before you continue. But persevere. I really recommend you persevere. Things obviously will change and that. But the main thing is to liaise with the management, get all the sign-off, and of course punch a hole into the firewall. So in summary, I would say Maven Bean is great for 80% to 90% of your commercial corporate development. The hard things would be like the EJB instrumentation. And you would use ANT. But having said that, again, I believe there's a new WebSphere plugin that works, no, a WebLogic plugin that works with BA 9.2. And you may not have to use ANT. But if you do, you would use ANT, the Maven ANT Run plugin to instrument your EJBs or to generate EARs that are deployable. There's also the Cargo project, which actually tries to deploy artifacts to a web container like Tomcat or even WebLogic or Glassfish or whatever you like. So the EJB plugin does support 3.0 and everything is in a state of flux. I've been told that Maven 2.0.5 is imminent with a range of plugins. So definitely Maven is the way to go if you want to avoid writing build.xml files. If you've ever come across, well, I know personally, I've come across a build.xml file which I couldn't understand. It worked on his machine and he checked it in one day and I checked it out, it couldn't work. And I don't know what was wrong. I spent hours, countless hours, trying to figure out what was wrong. And what did he have? He had C:/John Homeboy directly specified in a system path, and of course this thing was breaking, and it took me, I wasted half a day to actually find it. With Maven, you don't need to do that anymore. You just specify, this is my dependency, blah de blah de blah de blah, and then off you go. If not, if you don't know what version it is, you either use your Tomcat, or, you use your Firefox, and push in www.mavenrepository.org, and it will find your dependency. Or you can actually browse the Maven eBiblio on your own and get your dependency that way. There are still little bits there that are flaky in Maven. The site and the aggregation of reports, could be a lot of it, could be better when you're building multiple module projects. But I love Maven because I don't have to write any Java-C and tasks if I can help it. So, thank you for attending, and I'll take some questions if there are any.